difference.
Yeah, the other thing you have to remember is that she has a very, very, very checkered past. And this has nothing to do with Willie Brown. It has everything to do with her record as a prosecutor, particularly as the Attorney General. The things that she did to the Black community and the way that they have swept this under the rug for the entire. I mean, again, you want to talk. Everyone talks about Trump being the fascist. No, fascism's here already, and the Democratic Party brought it here. They have decided, under no circumstances will we allow for any infiltration regarding the candidate that we choose. We have chosen Kamala Harris to represent our country as a figurehead and nothing more. We will never allow anybody to know just how much of an influential role she played in millions of people being kicked out of their homes, specifically because of One World Bank and Steve Mnuchin, who she protected, and he gave her the biggest contribution that she received when she ran for the U.S. Senate in California.
How gross is that?
The only Democrat in his entire career that he's ever donated to. So to me, that's one story that never.
There's so many.
Never made it to national media.
And yet there's a lot with her.
There is a lot, but just that one story alone, which is irrefutable, was never talked about, never addressed. And why? Because the system is corrupt and it is completely been engulfed by corporate special interests. And the best example of that is what happened at the end of last week on CNN, which of course was, listen, we all have probably a very strong opinion regarding Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, the ultimate vulture capitalist.
He's disgusting.
Give a rat's ass about working people.
He's gross.
But as the saying goes,
he's interchangeable with like Bezos to me. What, like just 6 of one, half a dozen the other.
But a broken clock can be right twice a day. And so while he's never going to criticize Trump and his side, which is something that a lot of them tend to be guilty of, he really nailed the issue with the Democratic Party. And of course, he did this on a CNN panel, and Abby Phillip decided to fly a little too close to the sun with her commentary. So
I don't know who that is.
Well, you'll see.
Okay.
So here is the conversation. It's a brief one, but it gets to the heart of why we're dealing with the problems we're dealing with right now.
Stocks. This is the second time the Democratic Party has circumvented democracy and chose. That's not true. Yes, it is. Hillary Clinton was chosen, and she had Bruce Springsteen too. And what happened to her? And now we've chosen.
Kevin, Hillary Clinton won a primary. Okay, she won a primary. You may not.
Nobody could compete with her, even Bernie Sanders.
She won a primary.
Okay.
First of all, that's
really. So did Kamala Harris win a primary?
Listen, we've talked about this before.
What's wrong about talking about it tonight after what you just saw?
Do you think that's really what matters to voters
right now?
How many Democrats wish?
Your whole shtick has been, let's talk about what matters to voters. Do you really think voters care about the internecine primary process?
If you're a Democrat.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
It's a primary. Yes. Are they out of their minds?
And this Catherine Rampell, I don't want to make any judgments, Jen.
Oh my God, she's Karen.
Yeah,
it's like, do they really think that voters care about the electoral process? Do they really think that voters care about that? Is she out of her mind? And he's pointing out they cheated Sanders, which they did.
Yeah.
And it's like, I saw this clip, by the way. In fact, I was going to run this clip myself. I was going to do it today. He is pointing out something, because what they tried to do, they tried to say, well, this was a grassroots contest. Grassroots how? She didn't run. And I would go further. That just didn't run. Well, right. She didn't win a vote. Even back in the previous primary, she was deeply unpopular.
What this also tells me, and I think that this is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to corporate special interests, is that Catherine Rampell, who lives probably on the Upper West Side, is probably, again, I'm not getting into stereotypes.
Yes, you are. Stop doing it. But
my point is that this is the crowd that the Kamala campaign is catering to. They are catering to a very specific demographic of people who think like this.
It bothers me because I know them.
Selected.
I know these people.
Because what an upper class New Yorker liberal truly believes is that we know what's best for you.
Yes.
We know what's good for you. We don't need.
Do they really need a primary?
And so what if we have to rig it? Trust that
it's just need to beat Trump.
It's just Wasserman Schultz was once asked specifically, "Why do you think everybody hates you so much?" And her response was, "I know better than them."
Yeah.
It's like, I know better than them. I'm the smart one here. She's actually not that smart.
No, but this
they
woman
project themselves because they went to the right schools, they were in the right clubs.
How is this person an economics commentator? Like that's
because according to CNN, she just says what needs to be said.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
It's a pretty astonishing thing in a political space to say, do voters really care about the primary process? Is she out of her mind? Like the entire point of the primary, and honestly, I would argue, part of the reason why Harris is having such a hard time now is because she didn't go through a primary. That all things being equal, she was selected. She wasn't necessarily chosen through the fires of debate and going through to figure out who's the strongest candidate and get the seal of approval of at the very least the majority of the party and doing it. That didn't happen. They just chose her because Joe Biden tried to wedge. And again, let's be clear. Do we really believe that Joe Biden was going to serve another 4 years?
Not a chance.
Well, exactly, which means that Joe Biden wanted to win and then wedge her in the office because he didn't believe she could win herself. It's just that.
And that is so much worse.
Yeah,
so
it
much
is.
worse.
Agreed.
And I believe that's always been their plan. I actually believe that was their plan going back before 20, when Hillary basically latched on to, it was whatever, that big fundraiser, and Kamala was like their person, was their candidate. They had Kamala and they had Pete. They had like 2 horses in that race.
If you're going to get a
and they've always wanted Kamala in. And when she did so horribly in 20, and they realized that there's no way we're going to get this woman in on her own, she's going to have to go in as a VP. We're going to have to stick her in on somebody's coattails because otherwise she's never going to get elected. And
that's the thing about having your first Madam President, is that if you get her in by hook or crook, you will set women back significantly.
She's not. I don't think, yeah.
That's one of the reasons why.
Let Karen finish.
This is the important line, though.
Democrats, you sure as hell care today.
I know that you are from Canada, but the primary process.
That's why I'm perfect for this. I have no skin in the game other than to get a great president.
It's not in the Constitution. The political parties can choose however they want to choose their nominee.
Right.
And as long as they meet the legal deadlines in the states where they are on the ballot, they can do it however they want.
That's true.
And they're going to get the results accordingly.
That's true, by the way.
Yes,
parties are corporations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what she has effectively done with her audience is tell you the cat is out of the bag. We do not have to adhere to the will of the people. And these are the people that have the audacity to complain about the Electoral College, which I actually do approve of. It needs to be modified. But every projection is a confession? Or every accusation is a confession. And that's what they do. The fact that she so flippantly said it, as if to suggest, no, this is perfectly fine. Well, you know what? You're sealing the fate of the Democratic Party. You are nailing the lid shut on that coffin even tighter. If anyone had any doubt that they needed to leave the party, you are being given carte blanche to run run far away.
By the way, they admitted this back in 2016, if you remember, when
Jared,
what is his name? When he brought the lawsuit. And they effectively said, look, we can choose a candidate in a smoke-filled room. This is not illegal. We're a corporation. And as a corporation, we can set our own bylaws and do whatever the hell we want. And he's right. The Democratic Party does not have to have a primary. Neither does the Republican Party. They can just choose a candidate. It's just that there's no buy-in from the American public with them choosing a candidate. So this notion of a process to make it seem as if the public contributes to it, in which case the public will be invested by the time they get to the election, is the way it worked. Now, when you start changing the rules, it started making it clear to people, wait a minute, they seem to be able to do whatever they want. It doesn't seem to be a quote-unquote democratic process. And you would be right. They can choose whoever the hell they want. If they wanted to pick Kamala like that, they could pick Kamala like that. There's no issue.
I don't even know. That's fine. That's fine. And then you will find out how unappealing that is when you pick someone who is otherwise not coming up from being chosen from people. So I don't mind them doing that. But here's the other thing. I almost kind of prefer it to then their bullshit primaries where they cheat anyway. So it's kind of like, the Hillary, just 16, 20, pick your year. The shenanigans that occurred, everybody in 20 getting behind Joe Biden at the last minute, to do that.
And Warren not dropping out.
All of it. So that's just theater. it's just theater. So if you're going to have primaries in that regard like that, and then you're going to ignore them anyway, then yeah, why not just pick a candidate? But they will then they will lose more and more people, which is what I think
like, what's the point?
Should happen.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point? Even this time around, if you remember, they got rid of New Hampshire, Iowa as the first two. Part of the reason that they did so is because New Hampshire is unpredictable. Iowa is unpredictable. They didn't want to humiliate Joe Biden, so they put South Carolina first. This was another hit at the lefties. This idea that South Carolina is a conservative state, and so you're not going to get a Bernie Sanders to win in South Carolina first. You will get a Joe Biden and a Hillary Clinton to win in South Carolina regardless. They are the mainstays, the kind of brain trust of the party. New Hampshire's not that way. If you remember, Iowa went for Obama. New Hampshire could go for either case. They thought it may humiliate Joe Biden. And so, like, they were literally changing the contours of the electoral process in regards to the primaries in order to make a better way for Joe Biden. Now, the argument was, well, we want more blacks and a diverse representation, and Iowa is not that. As if South Carolina wasn't going to vote. South Carolina was always going to vote. The order of the process didn't all that much matter into the whole grand scheme of things. So what if Iowa goes first? So what if New Hampshire goes second? Or the first primary, Iowa's a caucus. I guess my point is, look, I understand where you're coming from with that. It's like, if you're going to game the system, then what's the point in having a system? The reality is, Republican Party, Trump would have never gotten elected with superdelegates in a particular political space.
Correct.
It's just that. So
yeah,
and now,
the Republicans are infinitely more democratic, and they don't. And this is something that I can attest to at a local level. The Republicans in their primary process, they don't sit there and screw around with each other. They just don't. Like, there's not like at the local level here, there is not like this underhanded thing. They're very open to primaries, and they very much are like, once they decide that's their person, but they don't undercut.
There's
like,
much more of the
Democrats are horrible.
Yeah, the Democrats, the people that work are like the party loyalists, the ones who show up at all the events and stuff like that. There is much more on the Democratic side, this sort of Mean Girls high school thing going on, much less so with the Republicans. They feel that way against the Democrats, but in terms of their rank and file, like they'll compete against each other.
Yeah.
You saw what happened between Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy, but they have one rule. And only one. When the general election comes around, you vote against the Democrat, and that's it. Everything else is fair game. You want to primary each other? Do it.
Right. They don't go out of their way to stymie their own people. Like, they just don't do that. And they tried with Trump. I mean, they definitely want to do with him.
I've been saying for the longest time, especially in Florida, if you cannot rid yourselves of somebody like Wasserman Schultz, you deserve everything you have coming to you. And they could do it. It's very easy. She does rule with an iron fist, and she did certain things during the course of the campaign that people knew that she was doing, including threatening people.
Yeah.
It's like you either have balls or you don't. And unfortunately, the difference between conservatives and liberals is conservatives are ready to fight, and liberals are not. They're ready to fall in line. Everyone says that Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love. Absolutely not. The conservatives fell in love with Trump, and the Democrats just fall in line with whoever the hell they tell them to. And that is the difference. And now, more than ever, it's kind of like what we've seen happen over in Israel in terms of, as you've pointed out, just how absolutely insane the Israeli population has become.
Yeah, no, they need to be lanced like a boil off the face of humanity.
If you went through 2016 the way that we did, and the amount of time and effort that it actually affected my business that I gave to Bernie, and knowing full well what had happened, the 2016 campaign of Bernie Sanders is still one of the greatest political campaigns that's ever existed. It was special. There were moments in that campaign that people will never remember, including one of the times
you never forget.
Well, they won't remember it because it's been swept under the rug. That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
And at that time, I can still remember because it was only put on YouTube. He gave a speech at one of the colleges in Virginia, And this Muslim woman came up and said that the rhetoric is just despicable and everything. And he asked her to come up to the stage. He wrapped his arms around her and he talked about how I'm Jewish and the differences between our people. It's just not right. And I'm just saying, this guy needs to be the president of the United States. Like, it's just painfully obvious. But then you wake up to the reality of people like that cannot become a president in this country. It's not allowed. They will do everything in their capacity, and they're showing you in real time. Now more than
they
ever,
prefer Trump to Bernie, for sure.
And I applaud the Democratic Party simply for this. Now they're not even pretending anymore. Now it's not even. If you think, because all signs point to Trump winning, that if you think that AOC is going to run in 2028 and somehow that's good, no matter how much ass she kisses, no matter, the only thing I will say in her defense is that she doesn't take the corporate money yet. That could change.
And you know what? You can't run for president without it, because she won't get the progressives. So that's where they end up stuck in that cycle.
So anybody who still thinks that there is some type of a belief that, oh, well, maybe in 28 we're gonna have an opportunity to do this.
They're Gavin Newsom or Whitmer.
You'll have
That's
Whitmer,
what they're thinking.
You'll have Newsom, you'll have Pritzker, you'll have Buttigieg, you'll have Shapiro, you'll have Bashir, and they're all going to run, and they're all going to take that filthy money, and the party is broken beyond repair. At what point?
And there will be no autopsy, and that's the worst.
So
part.
at what point does it? That is the point. Kamala will be swept into the dustbin of history, and they will pretend like it never happened, and then within a year, they will already have people out on the trail with their book. Well, Whitmer's going to write her book, and Newsom will write his. They're not actually writing the book, but this is going to happen. And it's the same bullshit, and it's the same story. And at what point do you stop opening the book and saying, I'm not falling for this shit anymore?
Now. That's why they're going to lose.
That's why I believe, and we could conclude the conversation this evening on this note. We were fortunate enough to have Butch Ware on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. I do believe that he's a movement leader.
Oh, yeah.
With all due respect to Jill Stein, he has something. I don't know what it is, but it's that it factor.
How do you not know what he's got? I can see what he's got. He posts pictures of him working out.
Well, that's
very clear.
Yes. And so
I'm very clear on that.
So what do you see as sort of the future as we thankfully we'll be past this election in a week, but I think a lot of things are going to change, because I do think that the Democratic Party is going to have a mass exodus in a way that they are just not anticipating, or maybe they just don't care at this point.
I mean, there needs to be an autopsy. There needs to be this kind of, every liberal, I've gotten to the point where talking to Republicans are easier, even though I disagree with them.
100%.
Liberals have a way about themselves where they're in a bubble. They don't get how the other people see them as elitists. They don't understand why people think that they're taking advantage of certain demographics, that they eschew issues of economics for issues of race and sex and gender and those type of things. They don't get how they lost so many voter base. Like how do you lose Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania was a Democratic stronghold for like 50 years. How do you lose that state? Or they don't get, I've had these arguments with them where I would point out, you guys are in a bubble, you guys are elitists, and it was like, they don't see it. They're completely oblivious to it. It's in their minds, it is rational to vote for the Democrat, even if it's incrementally different between the two. And as I will point out, you realize when it gets so incremental, when it gets so minute in regards to the differences, people stop caring. When there's no thematic vision for what you're trying to accomplish, people stop caring. You have lost something. Like, how do you get beat at the party of unions? How do you get beat by a blue-collar billionaire? You basically have literal billionaire running around with the working class that you have lost. How do you explain that? And there's never any real analysis or self-appraisal as to what happened. It's just not. It's the Russians, it's the Chinese, it's the Cubans, it's the Iranians, it's blacks being insufficiently loyal, it's a cold place in hell for a woman who doesn't vote for Clinton, or I would imagine at this point Kamala Harris. It's people
from
racist
a war
and
criminal,
bigoted.
mind you.
Yeah, there needs to be self-appraisal in this. I guess that's my point, right? That the political party needs in some way to be able to look at itself and say, okay, there are 50 million, there 49% of the population didn't vote. Why?